taken this old dead plant and animal matter down, stored safely in the carbon banks that took millions of years to make, and we call it oil and coal and gas. And we dig it up and we spew it into the sky for money. And if you take that stuff in the air and you get it back in the ground where it belongs, then you can rebalance this thing. We can go from, well, we were at 280 parts per million CO2 pre-industrial. Never above that. Not for millions of years. Now we're at 405. Okay, so take a deep breath and hold it. For every 4 molecules of CO2 that you just breathed in, or yawned in, one of those was placed there by human pollution. Okay, you can read that. That's how much we've altered the atmosphere, altered the chemistry of the atmosphere. So it's not a lot, it's just parts per million, but it's adding up. We can go from 405 back down to what might be theoretically a safe level, 350, near the end of this century, near the end of your lifetime. If we carve out 10% less pollution, 9%, 2% every year, and we get 100 gigatons back in the ground, because CO2 hangs around for centuries. Half of it's around for like 30, 40 years. The other half is around for centuries. So that's about 10 years worth of human pollution. So if anybody ever asks you, is it too late to stop climate change? Yes, it is. We changed climate. And physically, no, it is not impossible to change it back. We are changing climate every day. Every day that we do nothing, we are changing climate. So we can change it back, but it's becoming more and more difficult every year. This is the big chart. I had this one made up based on that science I just talked about. Where we were, 280 parts per million, the upper limit of what theoretically might be safe and stable for you guys and allow species and civilization to continue. Where we are today, 405 parts per million. If we had started in 2013, that's the green line, and we get back to 350 right around 2100. If we wait until 2020 and you did the same thing, same amount of reductions, same amount of carbon in the soil, that's the blue line, 2020, our next presidential election. We get back to 350, around 2,300? Yeah, so what we do between now and the time you graduate high school changes the future of life on Earth, probably for millions of years, as species either go extinct or make it, because we took climate change, and instead of letting it be something that just tails off forever, we made it a speed bump. We made it a little hiccup in the carbon footprint of the planet. We have to get the CO2 back in the ground. We're here to shut down the last oil refinery as quickly as possible, within the next few years. Did anybody see this on TV when it happened? Not when it happened?
Not when it happened, but I saw it after.
Okay, yeah. For 90 days, the Gulf of Mexico filled with oil. This was not far from my hometown. And as horrible as that was, and you know, I mean, obviously smoking is bad for you. It's bad for the planet too. But as bad as that was, if that oil rig had not exploded 5,000 feet under the water and filled the Gulf with oil, that thing would still be making good, cheap, clean gasoline, and you and I would still be driving around town using that gasoline. So was the oil spill a bad thing? It wiped out marine life, and that region will not recover. But we're changing the air, and we're changing the composition of the oceans by safely burning this stuff. So this was the time when I lost it, because we were supposed to fix climate change and really make a difference by 1998. And this was 2010. And so that's when I kind of snapped. And I realized that nobody was going to fix this for me. So that's the ice cap. That's the thick multi-decade ice in white. The gray stuff is the seasonal winter ice that melts away. It's no thicker than I am tall. And here it is after I owned 12 gasoline cars in my lifetime. So that's from when I went to high school, and then 12 cars later, that's what we did. So I am responsible for this. This happened on my watch. So why are we talking about this? Of course, there's a war going on. This is in Syria, back in 2010, again, same time as the Deepwater Horizon accident. And this blocking event happened in the jet stream because of climate change. The jet stream is shifting and not behaving well. And after many years of drought, farmers were forced into cities with no money, no crops. 1 million people fled into cities trying to stay alive, and you had something called the Arab Spring, which we also call the Facebook Revolution, where dictators around the region were toppled because people were rioting over food prices that doubled overnight. And the governments didn't know how to feed people and take care of them. So while it was, I guess, a good thing for democracy to get rid of those dictators, there's still a war going on in Syria, and 13 million people have fled for Europe. These are the refugees you keep hearing about all the time in the news, the immigrants, the people that people are so upset about right now. This was all started by a mega drought, a climate event. And we're going to see more and more of those over your lifetime. Because the climate is behaving exactly the way it's supposed to. When the weather shifted a few miles away from that in Pakistan, all that moisture had to go somewhere, the moisture that wasn't going into where it usually goes, and 20 million people were put out of their homes in Pakistan. Over the oceans, there's 5% more water vapor than there was when I was a kid in school, your age. And that's because, like, if you run upstairs and you get a little warm, you start to perspire. And the oceans are doing the same thing. They're evaporating a little more water, about 5% more. The land is giving off more water, too. It evaporates water out of the soil really quickly, and so we get these intense droughts. But it stays dry longer, and when the water does come in, we get these frequent extreme downpours and floods. The people who are dealing with this are not the ones who caused the pollution. People who live in huts and who don't have cars and yachts did not make the climate change. So climate justice is this idea that you and I might have insurance policies to rebuild our house after a flood or a fire or something. These folks don't, and they didn't cause it. But they're dying and suffering now from famines and wars that they can't escape. So we owe them. The last chart on this science here, again, just reiterating, here we are in 2017. We need to cut emissions 9% this year, 10% next year, if we wait to get started, and we will wait to get started globally. And then look what happens. At 2020, it's 12%. At 2025, we need to cut the emissions 25% every year to get back to 350 parts per million near the end of your lifetime. this was the time to fix this, and we didn't. But we can. We still can, and we must. And it's my argument that we morally give up our right to be like humane humans if we don't. If we don't care for our kids, if we don't protect our young, what's that about? It's not right. It's also illegal. It's also against the law. And I'll tell you about that really soon. We had some legislation introduced in Washington, in Olympia, some kids from here in Seattle, and it was basically following that plan that I just talked to you about. Our bill was 1372, and these were the emission cuts levels that we needed to see for our state in order not to violate your rights, your basic human rights under our state constitution. The government has an obligation to protect Washington's resources, essential resources, air and water, which you will require to grow safely to adulthood. That's what government is for. And that's been what government has been for thousands of years all around the world. Every civilization on earth understands that's what justice requires. Quick question. How many trees are alive on Earth today? Scientists didn't know either. And a group of kids that I work with in a group called Plant for the Planet wanted the answer, right? Because they wanted to get this carbon back into the ground. And trees are the best way to do that. So they need to know, well, how many trees are alive? Because we need to plant a whole bunch more. And we want to know what's possible. So a year and a half ago, a guy, an amazing, very cool young scientist in Seattle, was dumb enough to try to answer that question with experts in different fields from around the world. 4 years later, he came up with the answer. It's 3.03 trillion trees living on Earth today. That's 8 times more than anybody had ever estimated. But there were 6 trillion trees when we started cutting them down to grow our lunch about 10,000 years ago. So, the good news, we can take 3.03 trillion trees, and don't forget the 0.03, because that's 30 billion trees, and you don't want to hurt their feelings. 3.03 trillion trees needs to become 4.03 trillion trees to get that CO2 back into the ground. That's 10 years worth of human pollution. 1 new tree for every 3 trees alive. Can it be done? Do we have room for them? Where are we going to plant them? What kinds of trees? There's lots of cool and interesting questions that are going to have to be answered all over the world by people like you and me who love trees, love breathing, you know. So this is my carbon science right here. We've taken the air from 300 parts per million and we've made it 400 parts per million. Now we're going to take the trees that we've cut down, like we've cut down at least 1 trillion of those trees in the last century. We're going to take 3.03 trillion and we're going to make it 4.03 trillion. Right? You can do this climate science without your thumbs. Right? It's not complicated. It is complicated. It's not complicated for you and me to remember. Okay. Where are we going to put them? Well, nature needs to change with climate change, needs to adapt because it's going to be a weird century. So we need to set aside half the earth for nature. Now that sounds a little crazy, but it's physically possible if we just allow plants and animals to have primacy in important parts of the world. Like instead of having Rocky Mountain National Park where animals and plants are going to have to adapt to a rapidly changing climate over the next few decades, we need like the whole Rocky Mountains to be a kind of a beltway for animals to move up and down and around wherever they need to go, and for people to let animals have the right of way. So we don't have to completely evacuate We just need to make sure that we're not in their way as they try to survive this century. I'm going to try to show you a quick video from a woman, Wangari Maathai. Have you heard of her before? Oh, you're in for a treat. Who?
She's a locker lady here. We have lockers named after awesome humans.
Awesome humans. She is one of the most awesome humans. Oh my gosh, she is so awesome, you don't even believe it. So please learn about her, remember her from the locker. This is a story that she told all over the world towards the end of her life. Here she is telling a story, and then we're going to have a minute to talk and reflect on what we've gotten so far.
But I certainly don't want to be like the animals watching as the planet goes down the drain. I will be a hummingbird. I will do the best I can.